South Africa, the land of milk and honey. Is South Africa the land of milk and honey? Most people wonder why many foreigners are in South Africa. They ask questions like, why South Africa and not other countries? What does South Africa bring to the table? Or is the table in itself? The answer is not far. South Africans have experienced the discomfort of separation, deprivation, and poverty. Thus respect property and human life. This is portrayed by the warmth South Africans show towards foreigners. There are no Canaanites here, as we all arrived through our own or forefathers' initiatives. The democratic political nature of South Africa makes it every person's dream. They have the following values: human dignity, equality, freedom, non-racialism, and non-sexism. A country where people can express themselves without fear, a land where the government is controlled by the will of the people, a country that listens to citizens, striking and gives them police to escort them, the only in Africa I would like to believe, the first to recognize the LGBTQ and legislate same-sex marriages, the one that supports children's rights to an extent that if you are not careful, your child can take over and you are arrested in turn. Economic opportunities in South Africa are diverse. The country boasts of plenty natural resources and a large population of about 61 billion. It is a consumer economy, from baby food to adult stuff to dog food, you name it. As a business, if the strategy is correct, then the market is available. Investor property rights are not to be tampered with, as the legislation favors great investment opportunity. There is less cost for electricity and rates and taxes as running costs for businesses. The country boasts of a powerful and stable currency. Its infrastructure is world class and the places are highly accessible. It's a trading country with billions worth of exports: chromium, titanium, uranium. It is actually the 10th largest producer of uranium that can be used for generating electricity. I tend to wonder, why do we have so much load shedding when we sit with the mineral? Beryllium, which is responsible for the making of X-ray equipment, spacecraft, aircrafts, missiles, and satellites, and it is found in a few countries. It is also a gateway to Africa and vis-a-vis abroad markets for African countries. They are also friendly to multinational companies, some of which are now like parastatals. The fast food industry has a buzz of this with McDonald's, KFC, Burger King, only to name a few. Anglo-American has mining contracts and is one of the largest employers in the mining sector, as well as a great exporter. With South Africa not in the picture, wow, milk and honey indeed. I suggest the company to be called Anglo-South Afro-American, since the mineral is South African, for control's sake. On a lighter side, who knew that sunshine was something worth crossing oceans for? Well, we have plenty. Beautiful beaches and coastlines to consider for your vacations, from St. Lucia with the spacious, less populated sandy beaches to Port Shepstone with its extravagant flora and fauna, mountain ranges all shapes, great and small, from Drakensberg, Mafati, Devil's Peak, Table Mountain, to name just a few. The country is also home to the Big Five, with the Kruger National Park being the best, where you can see these on drives. The accommodation is 5-star and you will never miss home. It has beautiful cities than most countries in Africa: Port Elizabeth, Joburg, Pretoria, Cape Town, you name them. It also has light-hearted populace who laugh in the face of misfortunes. We also have police visibility to do away with crime. Why then does South Africa house so many foreigners? Is it because of its permissible policy, lack of border control, or no choice by other Africans as their countries' economies are collapsing? Are they looking for milk and honey? Here goes the untold story of the development of South Africa. South Africa was built on the backs of cheap African labor. Now, for rich or poor, we stood together as a continent to work for the masters of the day. The history of South Africa cannot be separated from the history of every other country in the continent. The first colonial settlement was at Table Bay in South Africa in 1652. It was created to supply passing ships with fresh produce. The settlement grew and it became a colony. Later, the other countries were colonized from South Africa as it became the base camp and the governing body which pushed for the Cape to Cairo. With the riches he got from Kimberley, Cecil John Rhodes strategized to take over from Cape to Egypt. They worked tirelessly to get northern and southern Rhodesia, Nyasaland, and many other states. In simple terms, there was no colonization of Africa without the annexation of South Africa, as well as its resources. The major reason, therefore, lies in the historic siphoning of labor from other SADC countries, making this their second home, as they contributed to its building. Around 1950s and 60s, the mining industry reached its peak and there was a shortage of workers. The local tribes were not interested as they had their own lifestyle they were following. The Zulus were busy with age regiments and most groups were not interested considering the activities of these white strangers. The solution was therefore to find workers from neighboring countries. The sad part is that the colonizers saw it as one Africa and sought to bring everyone to work for a common cause. Yet today as African, we see Shona, Zulu, Xhosa, Chewa, we see different cultures. They set up the Wits Native Labour Association, also known as Wenela, to recruit labor. The Galen-Gray Act was established to enslave Africans through introduction of tax, making them contribute to the building of the state. Hard taxes in northern Rhodesia were overcharged so as to force men to work in the mines, then save enough to pay hard tax for the entire village. The governments then agreed to send people under contracts to develop the land. This posed as the cheapest option for labor acquisition, and it was easy to control than the permanent local workers. The governments agreed to this labor export and were supposed to be compensated in the long run. Just recently in 2015, the governments of Zimbabwe and South Africa, as well as Zambia, they were working on compensating those who worked in Wenela. So far, 1,550 out of 66,000 ex-workers, most of which were suffering from silicosis and TB and other respiratory infections, came forth. The amount was 5 billion in 2016 and it was still being calculated. According to Makandei, the most miners died, but there are millions of pension fund lies in South African vaults unclaimed. Zambia is claiming 3 billion, Malawi is claiming 5 billion. This is just an estimate amount, but I believe the men who came to Wenela contributed much more and their lost lives are priceless, making them heroes of Egoli. Surely, their descendants deserve at least to benefit from this legacy, either as citizens or as foreigners, with so much respect from the locals. At a point, everyone in Swaziland, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zambia, they are entitled to be part of this development. Fast forward to 2009. There was need to develop South Africa into a world-class country in preparation for World Cup. Specialized and general labor was lured from the neighboring countries to prepare the land for the upcoming World Cup. Labor was needed from locals as well as foreigners. In 2010, the Home Affairs, under the guise of saying they want to document those running away from political turmoil in Zimbabwe, issued the DZP permit that was to expire in 4 years. This was also to legalize their stay so as to get them to also open bank accounts and pay taxes. The question then comes, do we then want foreigners when they are of benefit to us, when they build or plow? But when it's harvest time, we want to do away with them. It is true there is lack of skill in South Africa, especially the sciences, agriculture, architecture, actuarial, environmental, and a lot. The government has then appealed to fellow Africans and Europeans to come and get permits, then citizenship, so as to give the skill to the country. Tell me then, instead of developing their countries, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, they are here developing our land. Can we later say their offspring are not welcome to indulge in the beauty their parents created? God forbid. The question you all have is, why does the government employ foreigners instead of local labor force, since we have 32.7 unemployment rate? This is in percent. The truth of the matter, according to the Home Affairs reports, low education levels amongst my fellow countrymen leads to companies struggling to find qualified workers, hence look outside. The education we consumed under Bantu education was only for us to be able to read and write, but not fit for organizations. This then leads us to the new phenomenon, xenophobia, which has been the new normal, fear for foreigners, which leads to their discrimination and bloodshed. Between 2000 and 2008, 67 people died in xenophobic attacks, 62 in 2008 only. In 2015, the king of the Zulu nation, King Zwelithini, made a statement saying foreigners should go, inciting violence and brutality, and some countries repatriated their citizens. In 2019, KZN foreign businesses were attacked, 3 people were killed. In Joburg, there was looting in Jeepstown and Joburg CBD. Many foreign businesses were destroyed as well. Truck drivers' strike was also on as they fought against employment of non-South Africans. The immigrants are, according to the poll, 5 million out of 61 billion citizens. That's a drop in an ocean. So there's no need for antagonism of countrymen towards foreigners. Operation Dudula was then formed to push foreigners out of South Africa. They raided the Machinery Center, which is a refugee place in Soweto, in February 2022. This organization thrives on hatred of black foreign nationals, but leaves the white foreigners, who are even controlling the means of production. What can we then do as South Africans? Let's learn international relations. Let's strive to do better in our education system. And instead of celebrating a 30% pass because this is unfit for employment, let's do better. Let's learn from the foreigners and perfect our trade so as to be competitive. Let's also stop the banning, as this brings back the economy. People lose their jobs due to banning and looting. The budget is diverted to rebuilding, and in turn it costs us millions and millions, and it also costs us access to services. To all foreigners, do not take advantage of the local people's kindness and feel like you know everything. Learn from your host, and if it permits, go back and edify your own country of origin for the betterment of your future generations. Your children do not have to go through all your pain. If a man is shaped by his environment, then his environment should be made human.